Hello and welcome again to another session of English 104, Section 3003. That's Composition 2 with Mr. Fowler. I'm so glad that you're here to join us today on our penultimate class session, number 30, I believe. And let's get things rolling without further ado. I'm going to vacate the visual. You should still hear my voice though. And then I'm going to share today's PowerPoint with you. Okay, so for today, session number 30, we've got a brief preview and review, which shouldn't take more than about 10 minutes. So we'll get into that relatively quickly. I want to make sure that we touch base on a couple of basic things like the argumentative essay. And then I want to make sure that we cover some issues related to the revision or number 2, what I'm calling the final for the semester. Then we do have one additional last weekly discussion question to reference for the semester. And then the last 15 minutes or so of class, I'm going to wrap things up kind of early today, but then I will stick around in the Zoom if anybody has some specific questions. Okay, let's go ahead and start thinking about how things are going to proceed for our argumentative essay. I'll jump into that in just a moment. How did everyone's Thanksgiving go? Did you all have a good, relaxing Thanksgiving? And did anybody travel?
Yeah. Everybody does always speak at once.
No,
Wait,
not a lot
only
of
5 people
travelers.
here.
It doesn't sound.
It was a small get together.
Yeah.
Real small.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of us were probably getting together with family and friends in a more intimate capacity this Thanksgiving due to some of the recommendations and travel advisories and whatnot. I, also would remark on Devin's observation. We may have a smaller class session today because people might still be in transit back to their home base from the holidays. So I anticipated that this exact phenomenon. I also had a laid back Thanksgiving this year, but it was good. Sister's house, friends, family. It was fun. There were just about 10 of us, believe it or not. Fit just those perfect parameters. And that wasn't by plan necessarily. It was just, that was how it broke down. Any highlights, lowlights from the Thanksgiving festivities anybody wants to share?
Good food. We're having a little leftovers.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's like 1 or 2 weeks of prep food that we don't have to worry about after last Thursday. It's always fun. You know you're going to have turkey for about 3 days. So that's good, usually. Okay. Well, what's that?
We didn't have turkey this go round. We just had fish and chicken. That's about it. Because apparently, we eat a lot, but having turkey around, sitting around for 3 days, nah, our refrigerator can't hold that.
Well, that sounds just as good of a meal. I mean, I think that's exactly what they had. I don't know about chicken, but I know that they had fish and venison or deer at the very first Thanksgiving. So it's a little bit more traditional than turkey. There you go. Okay. Obviously, this week we have the argumentative essay coming up. So we have the rest of the day today and most of the session of time that we would have had for a more formal class On Wednesday, I'll be giving back over to you. We do have a short finale session on Wednesday that I will launch into. But this is the last full week of classes before finals week. So anything that we have to attend to for this course, we're going to have to get into today or Wednesday. So if there are any pressing questions or concerns regarding the argumentative essay, speak now or forever hold your peace, I suppose.
I'm still kind of having
know a
trouble
couple of you
finding
have been in
references. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm still having trouble finding
Oh.
references for the revenge topic because you know, a lot of these like require books that I don't have, like in movies that I can't watch. Like it's kind of hard to find references. Like I don't know what to go off of.
Well, today after we're finished with the session, I'll see if I can find any research materials, and if I do, I will pass them along to you.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I know that's tough. Remember that you can use the film and the book, our book, as, you know, 2 of those 4 sources. If you need to just comment on the book itself as a reference point, that can help a little bit. But still, even if you had those 2, you'd want 3 other more substantive sources. So I'll see what I can find. Have you tried the basics like EBSCOhost and
EBSCO.
opposing viewpoints?
I have not.
Through our library? Okay. Oh, you haven't tried those? Okay. So
Wait,
I would direct you to those
actually, yeah, I
resources
have.
via our
Actually, yeah, I have. Yeah, I had to realize what you were talking. Yeah, I have used EBSCOhost. Nothing much has really came up like of interest. Like this doesn't really target on what the thing's about. It just kept on reading. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
As I was saying, it
Well,
kept on referencing other sort of things not related to the revenge topic of Inigo Montoya or anything related to that.
I see. Well, like I said, I'll do a little bit of research there to see if I can help smooth out any wrinkles out of that process. In the meantime, though, I'm going to go ahead and launch into today's session. So once again, I'm going to stop my visual, but you should still be able to hear my voice. And I'm going to share that the rest of that PowerPoint. Okay. So for session session number 30 for us, today we're going to focus on revision number 2. And you might want to begin your thought process in regard to this entire assignment by asking why even bother to revise. And I would suggest that revision is a critical step in the writing process altogether. It's sort of the last thing that you do before a piece goes out into the world and is offered up to the audience. I don't want to suggest it's a sacrificial offering to the audience, but sometimes it might feel that way if you're a burgeoning writer. So obviously, some of the chief changes and concerns that we have addressed so far this semester are grammar related. There are certain grammatical things that you should be able to have a good handle on before you advance into the higher level writing courses. For example, you should be able to identify fragments and run-ons or comma splices in your writing and in the writing of others to help you correct those errors. You should also be aware of at least 3 of the basic comma rules. You should use commas with coordinating conjunctions when you're joining together 2 sentences to make a compound sentence. You should use commas whenever there's a list being referenced in writing. And you should use commas with introductory or prepositional phrases as they appear in your writing. Now, beyond that, there are additional comma rules that are very helpful, especially when you begin a sentence with a subordinating conjunction or subordinating sentence when you create what is called a complex sentence. Some of your other instructors may emphasize those comma rules more frequently than others. You should also know that there are things called restrictive phrases that might name or give additional information about an initial subject. And if those pieces of information, sometimes called appositives, appear in the middle of a sentence, they're flanked by commas. And if they appear at the end of a sentence, they're preceded by a single comma. But comma rules are something that I don't try to drill down too deeply on, because in the past, I think I've overwhelmed students with comma rules. And I think comma rules and grammar, beyond those initial concerns, shift from one instructor to the other. But those are all essential things that we should have in hand before. But if we didn't, I hope that you've been able to, single in on those concerns in your writing and address them as need be. Now, beyond grammar, though, there are some other additional important changes that you may need to make to your writing, including sentence level errors, but also some stylistic and formatting concerns. So for this last assignment, the second revision, or revision 2, as I'm calling it, you have two choices. Of course, on the one hand, you have your persuasive essay, which is graded and should have been returned to you by this point. And you also will have an opportunity to revise your argumentative essay. Now, remember that the argumentative essay is due this upcoming Friday on or before midnight. I certainly hope that at this point in the semester, with all of the other work from your additional courses, that you're not going to wait until Friday at midnight to turn in your essay. But if you need to that time, it's yours. I will be working pretty much all weekend on turning around these essays, because that's a quick turnaround even for someone like Mr. Fowler. That's about 40 plus essays that I have to plow through and read, assuming that, everybody gets them in on time. So I'll have to work relatively diligently and quickly, but that's only fair. I've asked you to take some time to write a good essay, and I'll need at least that weekend to sort of turn things around. If you find yourselves in a relatively common predicament, which is that you're frozen up or you don't know if you can get it in on time, just keep working. Don't worry about the revision. Make sure that you get the argumentative essay done first. Prioritize that so you can get it turned into me. And I'll take a look at anything, even if it's really rough. Remember that. So when it going back to the revision selection process, though, which essay should you choose to revise? There are a couple of concerns to think about. Obviously, for some of you, this may be easier than for others, because you might want to focus on the essay that you received a lower grade on. So if you got a B or a C on your revision, or I don't think anybody got a lower than a B or a C on the persuasive essay, but let's say you did, you may want to focus obviously on the persuasive essay. And by contrast, if you're rushed on the argument and you turn that in and you don't get the results that you'd expected, I think that would be the obvious choice of the two. But you may have received very similar or the exact same grade on your argument and your persuasive essay. So you may want to then ask yourself a secondary set of questions. Did I have more to say in the revision? Could I have found more compelling evidence if I had additional time? Well, you do. So that might be one way of approaching the selection for your revision essay. Is there more, by contrast, to argue about? Or is the scale of your argument larger than the parameters of the argument originally allowed for? You may want to go ahead and edit and add into that. Is there an opportunity to clarify something, especially with the persuasive essay, if you didn't feel that you had created as persuasive as possible of an argument? This is your chance to correct that error or address that concern. Can you clarify something in your audience or something to your audience by making your argument more specific? Again, this is a good question for the argument. Remember that this is essentially a second opportunity to fine-tune an essay. How can I take advantage of that opportunity? That might be the best way to respond to that kind of question. If you are exhausted mentally and ready to move on and put this semester in your rearview mirror, that's okay. That's a natural feeling at this point. So you may just want to say, you know what, rather than think too deeply about this, Mr. Fowler, I'm just going to take the revision suggestions that I'm offered on the argumentative essay and revise that one and turn that in. That's fine. There's no harm in that. That's pretty much what I might expect a number of students to do. If I were a student at this point in the semester and I was dealing with 3 or 4 other classes, that would probably be my primary mode of operation. But it's not always the same for every student. So as always, options abound. Okay, when it comes to the actual process of revision, you should start by asking yourself a couple of large scale questions. Think about the assignment itself. Did you read the assignment? And did you reread it to make sure that you fully understood the guidelines for that essay? If the answer is no, this might be a place or a time for you to think about how to go back and best address those chief concerns or issues. Secondly, consider, as always, your audience. Anytime you write an essay or you write anything for work or life or pleasure, you should always ask yourself about the concerns, the needs of your audience. Can you say that your essay was written with a specific audience in mind, even if it was Mr. Fowler or my fellow classmates? Especially for the argument, you may want to encourage your reader to take some form of action or adopt a philosophy or even just consider an alternative perspective. If you've done that, you've probably been successful in writing your argumentative essay. Let's take a look now at the structure. The next several frames will focus on this material specifically. When it comes to your introduction, make sure that you've found an interesting topic that compels your reader to consider all of the hard work that you've put into the writing process. You should answer the basic 5 W's at some point in your paper so that your audience is familiar with the concept, or at least is grounded in enough background material that they can understand what's at stake. Then the beginning of your sentences in your introduction should logically lead to your thesis statement. Specifically for your thesis statement, it should express some sort of claim about your topic, or it could address a specific central idea, or even justify the discussion or debate under focus in the paper. And then, of course, it should also preview the argumentative structure and maybe even introduce the evidence that you're going to use throughout the course of your paper. From this point on, if you've done everything correctly in your introduction, the body paragraphs that you create should be relatively easy to construct. Essentially, body paragraphs begin with topic sentences, usually aided by transitional terms or phrases, and then they introduce evidence or introduce quotations that are added for parenthetical citation to give credence to your argument and back up your assertions. For body paragraphs, you should begin each one with a topic sentence indicating the main idea, and the main ideas of every paragraph should relate back to the thesis in some way, shape, or form. Your thoughts should progress from one paragraph to the other or to another in a clear and organized way, offering substantive evidence, support, and analysis in each of the paragraph's main ideas. So far, I'll say this semester, I haven't had any issues with body paragraphs in student writing or making clear transitions from one point to the next. I know that there are individual concerns and individual papers about finding the best potential evidence to make a claim clear or to develop effective and efficient support, but those, of course, are individual student by student concerns. But taken as a whole, I haven't seen too many troubles with this. And in point of fact, I've seen really good work when it comes to structuring body paragraphs so far this semester. And then, of course, thinking about the structure, you should have a final and coherent conclusion, emphasizing the topic and reviewing the thesis that you constructed earlier in the essay. It should come to a logical conclusion and not simply end. Okay, once you've attended to the structure and the overarching concerns about why it is you're writing the essay you've been asked to construct in the first place, you should focus on the details, specifically grammar and citations. You should read over your essay to check for grammar and consistency. And I've offered a couple of suggestions along the semester to do this. One is to read your paper backward. And I don't mean that you're reading like Bizarro Superman, you know, where the words don't make sense or anything. Just read your conclusion first and then your subsequent final body paragraph backward until you reach the conclusion. If you've never tried this before as a way to monitor for your grammar work, you should give it a try. You may also want to conventionally read your essay out loud before you submit it to just make sure that it doesn't sound strange or that you haven't twisted your meaning around in your writing and that you're as clear and concise as you wish to be. There are also various grammar and mechanics works out there or resources out there like Grammarly. I know a couple of my students subscribe to Grammarly and they say that it's helped them quite a bit on their papers. So if you have one of those resources, I think you should take advantage of them. And if nothing else, just when you before you submit a paper and you think it's done, I know this sounds like something that should be relatively obvious, but I strongly suggest doing a grammar and spell check on the essay before you turn it in. Some students are still not doing this, believe it or not, and that costs them some easy points that otherwise they wouldn't have to have deducted. If you are interested in having a peer review partner look at your argumentative essays, make sure that you, or even take a second look at your persuasive essays, I suppose, go ahead, email me, and I will facilitate a peer-to-peer review session for you that you can use. For citations, This has come up a lot in the last couple of weeks as students finish things off. Remember that when you have a citation, you should introduce the citation in the body of the essay, queuing it up by saying something like, according to author X, quote, and then deliver the information, close the quotation, use the parenthetical citation, which is typically the author's last name and the page number from the periodical or novel that they are quoting from, and then close your quotation, then put the period at the very end. That should be the last thing that you put down. Again, there are a lot of different resources for this sort of thing. Turnitin.com is one way to check your citations and your essays. You don't have to send the results to me, but you can use Turnitin.com to help you as a student and improve your essays and make sure that you're avoiding, unintentional plagiarism, things like that. There are multiple various programs out there online that will help you format your works cited or references page correctly. Remember, it's called a references page if you're writing an APA style. You may also send any questions you have or just a reference page to me to double check for formatting if you want to take advantage of that opportunity. So far, though, I think that between bibme.org and the citation machine, that most of these works cited pages are now well in hand. I don't see too many issues or errors with them. But a couple of things have come up lately that I feel I should mention. Don't forget that as you create citations for your works cited page, you should make sure that your citations are double spaced. You should make sure your citations are feature a hanging indentation. And you should make sure that your citations are alphabetically ordered by the last name of the first author, if there are multiple authors, or just by the last name of the author if you have a single author. If you're missing an author name and you only have an article title, use the article title as a reference point for your alphabetical organization. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and move on to a quick review. I posted this just before class began today. We do have one last weekly discussion question to reference for this week. Remember that you should respond to the original response, our original question, which is as follows. Do you feel that you have the adequate time and resources to complete the argumentative essay, not the revision, number 2, not the final? We're just focusing on the argumentative essay, which again is due this Friday by midnight or 11:59 p.m. If not, what else do you feel you might need? And this is a last sort of question for the semester to consider, because I think it's relevant for me and for future students to be able to learn from your experience, whether that was positive or negative. Perhaps I need to provide more time for this final essay, or maybe I need to structure the final essay assignment differently in some way, shape, or form. Any feedback that you could provide will be effectively helpful for me, but also should go on to help other students who take this class in the future. Once you've answered that question, remember to go ahead and see if there are other students who have posted any similar or different sorts of responses. You can say something this time along the lines of, you know what, I think that's a really good point. I also feel confident, or I too would appreciate more resources or more direction in this area or that area. That may be a good way to respond to your fellow students' questions. Try to respond to at least 2 of your fellow students' questions or responses in the weekly discussion thread. And then look out in case I sneak in there and ask you a pointed question so that you can come back and respond to Mr. Fowler's question. And maybe we can keep the discussion going that way. Okay, so that's this week's weekly discussion question. Okay, that's pretty much taking us to the end of what I wanted to focus on today. The rest of our time is all yours. And realistically, if you don't have any questions or concerns at this time, you may exit now. There's not a lot else that I have to provide today in terms of content. But if something else should come up later or post class and you didn't think to ask that, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll be available for most of the day today. All right. So again, just pausing for a few seconds. Are there any additional questions, concerns that I can address right now before we sign out?
Not at all.
I got a question.
Okay.
I submitted my paper right before class started. And then I realized I talked to Carol Wobena of the library to
Yes.
so she could edit my works cited. And I realized I didn't even think to apply some of the changes that she helped me address to the citation in the paper. I noticed that it was all the article title was all caps. And I used that in my citation as all caps. And then she told me that it shouldn't be in all caps in the works cited. So I'm guessing I should change that in the citations. And I'm wondering if there's any possibility that I can resubmit my paper or if that's too late.
No, that's fine.
Fourth
You
one.
can always do that. And that's a great question to bring up, Kevin. Anytime that you discover there might be something awry with a citation or paper formatting, you can always submit the paper again. And a lot of students have found this out already. But you can write a little note in addition to submitting the paper and say, Mr. Fowler, will you please focus on this essay as the final draft that I want to turn in for a grade? And what I'll do, I'll just skim through and I can delete the other one and then focus on the one that you want me to look at.
Okay. I didn't realize I asked because I was clicking on the spot that says submissions. And so it was going to the one that I submitted already. And I did not realize that I could resubmit another paper. So I'll go ahead and do that. Thank you.
Yeah. You can I think you can submit multiple drafts to any Dropbox.
I'll just put a note.
I've only had to submit a couple, but no big deal. Okay. Good question though, because that's a large scale concern that might be applicable for a lot of students in the class, and for students who aren't or couldn't be here today for this session, virtually, but they may watch this reference video in the future, in the next couple of days, so, or even later today, depending on when it gets uploaded. Great question. Any other questions or concerns that you all think might be relevant?
Mr. Fowler.
Yeah, go ahead, Caitlin.
So I just decided today that I want to change my topic for my paper.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, originally I was going to write about how when characters choose emotion over logic, they get the short end of the stick, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
And now I want to say how in the movie, even though Goldman made both the movie and the book,
mm-hmm.
he shows in the movie, he takes out all of the history and the background of every single character pretty much.
Yeah.
So I want to say how um, he's saying that like where you came from doesn't matter as much as who you are in the end.
That's a really good thesis to think about. In fact, there was one additional question that we didn't have time to get to, weekly discussion question prompt, that addresses that very concern, but it focused on Inigo Montoya and Fezzik. But that's a really interesting topic or thesis to apply to that argumentative style of essay writing. So yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay.
And I think that would make for a decent paper. I hope that you have enough time with, you know, do you think there's anything that you could have used from your original writing to shift into this paper essay?
There is some like based on like the emotions and stuff like that I can switch into
Oh,
this
good.
new one. But
Yeah, that's good because that way you can still use, you know, that forward momentum that you'd had with paper writing. But every once in a while, this happens that you discover you might feel more passionately about a topic, or that you're sometimes students burn out and they need an alternative topic. I'm not saying that's the situation here, but I've had that happen before. And sometimes you just, in the process of writing one paper or writing about one topic, you find that you're focusing a lot of time and attention on a specific resource, and that the thesis or question that you begin to answer changes as part of the writing process. So that's understandable. But like I said, I hope you have enough time to smooth everything out by Friday.
I should.
Okay. If something comes up, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Another
Okay.
good question. Any other large scale questions or specific questions about your papers that you want to ask? Well, okay. It seems like that we've drawn to something approaching a conclusion for this course, or for this session today. On Wednesday, I will host one more session. It'll be brief, probably only about 20 minutes. So you'll have to make the determination as to whether or not that's worthy of your time or your consideration. You may find that it would be time better spent focusing on the writing of your essay, and that's not going to offend me whatsoever. I will still record it, even if I only have one other student as an audience member, and post it later if you want to go back and think about things. But we'll just have some last minute questions for consideration, or some last thoughts about the writing process and our journey as a class this semester. So look forward to that on Wednesday. And until then, this is Mr. Fowler signing off, encouraging you to continue to think, continue to be well, and ask critical questions. Take care, everybody.